morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you wherever and whenever you are joining us. Welcome to our latest edition of What Caught My Eye, or WCME Sports. As always, I'm your host, Coach Nick Veschi. I am joined by the boy, Stephen Veschi.
What up?
Noticeably absent tonight is the man, Stephen Comlow. He's had some technical difficulties, you could say, with his computer. I think maybe some of his illicit gambling he's done on the dark web kind of caught out with him and angered some Chechen rebels. So I think they shut his computer down for a while, at least. So he's not with us tonight, but, you know,
He owes the Chechens money.
Yes, and maybe some Nigerian investors as well. So if you're disappointed not to see him, so are we, but he'll be back shortly. Apparently he's got IT people working on it, so we should see him next week, hopefully. If you're new to our show, our whole kind of premise idea is we want to take the most eye-catching, noteworthy events from the sporting landscape that happened over the past week, bring them to you almost like in highlight form, give you some context, perspective around what we saw, and kind of let you know kind of maybe what you should be looking for in the future. Right? I think sometimes a lot of people want to know, hey, what should I be watching? What should I be tuning in for? What should I be looking for? Because it's kind of an oversaturation in the market in terms of how much, right? There's so much to look at. How do I know where to put my focus? And so that's one of the things we want for our viewers and listeners. This is at its core, we believe an educational show where you learn something. If you learn something new each time you listen to us, we've done our job, right? I tell people all the time, think of it almost like 90s 2000 Sports Center, where we highlight the things that are most important up front and we present them like statistics, analysis, those types of things in a fun but educational format for those of us so we can be better sports fans. We can learn more about the sport that we may not have known about. We can be more educated as a whole, and we can feed our fandom, because ultimately the more you know, the more engaged you are, the more invested you are in what's happening on the field. And that ultimately is why we care what happens on the field.
Remember when people did analysis instead of clickbait hot takes? The good old days.
That seems so far. I'm so far removed from that, where
it does feel far
where every
removed.
show was, let's talk about this instead of let's make a outrageous claim and bash someone
just to get engagement.
Yeah, or to make us feel better. Right? So before we get into it, just a reminder to follow us on all of our socials at WCME_sports. That's on Instagram and on X. We're also on Facebook. You can find us there as well. We have a website, WCMEsports.com. And look for our episodes. They drop every Wednesday at noon on Spotify and on YouTube. Now, without further ado, get into our top catch from the last week. And, the boy and I, we both decided pretty easily that our top catch from last week was Shohei Otani. If you didn't notice or saw, he made not just like one bit of history, but several things that were just so unbelievable. I kept looking and thinking about what is the correct superlative, because unbelievable may not make sense, because we should believe it because we saw it. It happened, right? It's not like this is fantasy or, hearsay or urban legend. We saw it happen. We are all witness to something incredible, right? Otherworldly. It's hard, unfathomable almost, right? You have such a difficult time putting it in perspective and understanding and appreciating what you saw, because it is unprecedented. And that ultimately may be the word I wanted to settle on, is unprecedented. You're seeing something that no one has ever seen before, that no one may ever see again, right?
Except
so it's pretty
him, maybe.
Exactly. The only person who could top it may be him, but he's going to go back to pitching, because remember, he also pitches, right? So I would expect the stolen base numbers to go down, because, if he's that, and you're pitching in a game, you're trying to go 7 innings, you're wasting a lot of energy trying to steal bases,
especially
in that
start too.
Yep, because that's what's giving you that power, your legs and your core, which is what you're stealing the base with. So if you didn't know, on Thursday of last week, Shohei Otani became the first player in Major League Baseball history to have a 50-50 season. So that's 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the same season. He accomplished the feat in the same game, right? So in one game, he got his 50th stolen base and hit his 50th home run, and it was in a 20-4 Dodgers win over the Marlins. But that's not even the end of the story, because yes, as remarkable it is to have a game where you have a home run and a stolen base, he didn't just stop there, right? In this game against the Marlins, Ohtani went 6 for 6, had 3 home runs, 2 doubles, so that's 5 extra base hits, 4 runs, 10 RBIs. He drove in half of their runs, and 2 stolen bases. And, oh yeah, he stole 2 bases, right? And what's crazy is he got thrown out stretching one of those doubles into a triple.
So he
Barely got thrown out. I mean, had to be a perfect relay. So he almost hit for the cycle in this game. It's incredible. In a lot of ways, the question came up of, is this the greatest single game in Major League Baseball history? And before we talk about that, here's some things to put that in perspective. It is only the 16th 10 RBI game in Major League Baseball history. There have been more perfect games thrown than 10 RBI games.
That's wild.
Right? 10 RBIs are the most in the game in Dodgers history, at least since the stat became official in 1920. And the Dodgers have had a lot of good players, right? Not even just the recent people that we've seen come through, but back in the days, your Duke Snyders and Jackie Robinsons and like Roy Campanellas and all these, fantastic players that had come through that organization. None of them were able to accomplish this. Ohtani amassed 17 total bases. So a total base is how many bases you get off of your hit, right? So if I hit a single, I've earned 1 total base. It doesn't matter if I come around to score on someone else's hit. It only counts what I've done, right? I hit a home run, 4 total bases, right? So he amassed 17 in this one game. It's tied for 3rd most all-time in a game ever in Major League Baseball history. It is the most total bases by someone in a game without them hitting 4 home runs. So everyone else on that list who's with him or above him hit 4 home runs in a game. He only hit 3. Right? Boy, do you know who he's tied with for 3rd at 17 total bases in a game? If you can get one, I'd be impressed.
Josh Hamilton?
No, we're going to get to him in a second, actually. Think of your razor when you were, scootering along. Scooter Jeanette.
That's what I was thinking, Jeanette, but I was like, that sounds.
Yeah, he had a couple years ago. He had a 4-homer, 10 RBI game with the Reds, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember him with the Great American. Was it in the Great American?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Michael Jack Schmidt, had a game, and Gil Hodges, who I believe both of them are in. Well, I know Mike Schmidt's in the Hall of Fame. I know Gil Hodges was a phenomenal player as well. So these are the only people above Ohtani. Joe Adcock, and yes, I said Adcock. I didn't, mix my words. He had 18 with the 1954 Braves. The aforementioned Josh Hamilton, who we remember his amazing 4-home run game against the Orioles in Camden Yards. He holds the American League record at 18 total bases from 2012. Here's another one for you, boy. Do you know who stands alone with the most total bases in a game?
Who stands alone?
19 from 2002.
2002? I mean, Barry Bonds?
No, it is Shawn Green. Also of the Dodgers, when he hit 4 home runs. I remember this. It was against Milwaukee in Milwaukee, I believe.
Is that Shawn S-H-A-W or S-H-A-W?
Yes, S-H-A-W-N. Shawn Green. Lefty, Blue Jays, Dodgers. Think a little bit on the Mets at one point. But yeah, he has the most at 19. He had a 4 home run game. He only had 7 RBIs in that game, actually. But I think it was 4 homers. It was a double and a single, I think he got as his 6 hits, and that gave him 19 in that game. Of the top 25 games ever for total bases, no other player stole a single base in their game. Ohtani's the only person on that list who stole a base, and he wound up stealing 2 in this game. Again, just how bonkers and ridiculous that it was. It's if just to give some more perspective, 9 members of the 500 home run club don't even have 50 stolen bases in a career, and Ohtani did that in one season. No one has ever had a 50-25 season. No one's ever hit 50 homers and had 25 steals. The closest were Willie Mays and A-Rod. They each, I believe, had a 50-24 season at some point. There's RBIs, if you're thinking, well, what's the most ever in a game? He was close. The most is 12 by Jim Bottomley in 1924 and Mark Whitten as part of a 4-homer game in 1993. So he was 2 away from having that all-time record. And again, it brings up that question of, did we just watch possibly the greatest individual effort ever?
Yeah, what do you think? Do you believe that?
The
I
stolen
mean,
base,
it feels yeah.
the stolen bases is what would do it for me because, like I said, no of these other players on this list who had these like crazy 5 for 5, 6 for 6 games with 4 homers and all that stuff. No one else stole a base. None of them, right? And that to me would be what sets it apart. If he hit for the cycle, if he got in that cycle, yes, it ends there. Because literally you accomplished everything you could in a baseball game,
Right.
right? Or if, and I guess the other question, if he hit for 4 home runs, would it have changed? Like, do you think that makes it go greatest ever, ends it there?
I don't know. It's hard for me to say greatest ever because I want the 4 home runs. I think that's like so ridiculous hitting 4 home runs. But yeah, going the 10 RBI is pretty insane. 10 RBI with the stolen bases, like the fact that you're still like getting on base and stealing. I mean, game was kind of out of reach though. But
I mean, he did those stolen bases earlier. Though. It wasn't like it
yeah.
was the 8th inning and he stole off a position player. He did hit one of his homers off a position player, but that ball almost went out of the stadium. So that kind of evens it out, right? He almost hit the ball out of the stadium.
And they clinched the
division in that
spot,
one,
right? Playoff.
Playoff.
I don't think they clinched the division.
Correct.
It was a playoff spot, right? So maybe that kind of carries you too a little bit. That it was like in that late September when you're going into the playoffs.
And his accomplishment of getting the 50-50 in that game should also carry weight too. So it wasn't like it was
there's a lot of pressure going on. I mean, how many guys like do we see when they're sitting on like home run number 499 or a milestone number or whatever, and they just like they tense up or they start pressing in the box and they go through a little skid and a slump. Shohei does the exact opposite.
Yes, I mean
500 over his last 7 games or something.
Yeah, he even said, I think, after the game of like, yeah, I was thinking about it. I want to get over with as fast as I could. And like you said, that may be one of the hardest things to do because it's not easy to hit a baseball. It's probably the hardest thing to do
in sports.
In all sports, right? And so he's just saying, oh, I just got to put a couple out so I can get to this. Let me just steal some bags. I think he's stealing bases at like over a 90% clip too. So it's not like he's like when Canseco did it to be the first person. He, I believe, got thrown out stealing a lot. Basically, anytime he got on base on first base, he took off and was like, I know I'm going to make it.
He has only been caught stealing 4 times.
That's an incredible.
He has 55 stolen bases and 4 caught stealing.
Yeah, that's if you could do the math there real quick, boy, on what his percentage
I don't know
is.
I don't feel like doing the math right now, but that like I feel like it's just what we're seeing when you focus on one thing. Like he had, because of the Tommy John surgery or whatever, and he couldn't pitch, that he has to focus on like hitting. That's all he's doing this year. Focus on hitting. We're just seeing the best player on the planet decide like or be able to go focus on one thing and just absolutely tear people up.
Yeah, it's a 93.2%.
Okay.
By the way,
I mean that's gotta be like the highest. Like I would have to think minimum of like 10 stolen bases. That's got to be the highest.
I mean, one of the highest, right? I bet there's someone who went 20 for 20 in a season.
It is easier. Like they did make it easier to steal bases this year.
Yes.
Last year, I guess. But that's still ridiculous.
But then that would beg the question, okay, then why isn't everyone putting up
Correct, I agree.
At least going 20-50, right? Because no one's doing
that. Go 40-40, right?
He went 40-70 last year. And no one's ever done that. Ellie De La Cruz this year, I believe, is at 20-60. And I think we talked about this earlier several weeks ago when he got to that on our show about the number of people ever done that. And that is pretty low. It's like Ricky Henderson, Joe Morgan, Eric Davis, Acuna, and Ellie, right?
He's got 65.
Yeah, so Ellie's going to wind up leading the NL in stolen bases, which is a shame because I got to think if Ohtani was in the AL, I don't know who's leading in that, but I got to think he would be winning that as well. So he would have a chance.
Jose Caballero
on the Rays. Jose Caballero.
Caballero. 44.
Okay, right.
He's
exactly. So
16 times.
That makes Ohtani's number even more asinine.
Ellie De La Cruz has been caught 16 times as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, the fastest guy in baseball. I would probably guess like one of. I mean,
One of, yeah.
Shohei's freak athleticism. I feel like it's something we like overlook because he's so big that we don't
Yeah.
realize how unbelievably fast he is.
Well, if you wanted an encore, he gave you one the next night. Because the next night versus the Rockies, Ohtani hit another home run and stole another base in the Dodgers 6-4 win. So that gave Ohtani 14 games this year with a stolen base and a home run in the same game, which broke the record for such games in a season previously held by Rickey Henderson when he did it with the Yankees in 1986. So there's another record that he put on there. And oh yeah, not to be done. On Sunday, Ohtani came up in the bottom of the ninth down, I believe a run, and he hit the game-tying home run. And then the next batter, Mookie Betts, the great Mookie Betts, hit a walk-off homer as the Dodgers beat Colorado 6-5. So a just ridiculous week. I mean, a ridiculous season, really, right? Here's his stats entering play Tuesday, just kind of like we said, give some perspective and how dominant he's really been. His average is up to 301. He has 53 homers to lead the National League, 123 RBIs to lead the National League, 55 stolen bases, which is good for second in the NL, 391 total bases, which leads the NL, 128 runs, which you guessed it, leads the NL, 640 slug, leads the NL, 1023 OPS, you guess it, leads the NL. And he has 8.4 WAR out of the DH position, which is
like unbelievable
yes.
to do that. Like all you're doing, your job is to hit. Like you don't get the extra benefit of fielding or doing anything else. Like that's
correct. And normal, because as we know, WAR is about replacement player at your position, and normally a DH is putting up better power numbers than say a pitcher, right? Or your platoon left fielder you got out there. So that, again, makes that even more impressive that he's having to compare it to some of the better hitters in the league. His 162 game averages for his career, 280 batting average, 42 homers, 106 RBIs, and 27 stolen bases. And again, by the way, the guy pitches and is a phenomenal pitcher. So it's just nuts. And I guess the last question I have, and people have debated this, whose season are you taking, Aaron Judge or Shohei Otani?
I think because Shohei got this close to Judge's power numbers. Like if you told me literally a week ago, I'd be like, I'll take Judge's numbers. But because of those stolen bases, and I think he's 2 behind Judge in home runs, and he is still, I think, like 15 back in RBI. The RBI numbers for Judge are ridiculous, and the OPS numbers are ridiculous. As far as impact for your team, that's where I kind of go, okay, which one would I rather have this year? Because Judge plays center field and he plays a very good center field. So do the stolen bases make up for the defensive aspect that Judge brings?
Possibly, yeah. That's like the kind of the $1 million question. But I think I'm kind of with you. Whereas this puts it over the top. I'm taking this because if you go by WAR, Judge is well over 10 WAR for the year, which not a lot of people ever get a 10 WAR season. But again, Ohtani with that 8 WAR, I'd like to see where that ranks in terms of DH seasons, like your Big Poppies, your Edgar Martinez's, Frank Thomas. What were their high WARs on their best seasons? Right, that's kind of my question there. I got to think Ohtani's ahead of them in terms of that. So I think I got to go with Ohtani.
I think Edgar Martinez was the high with the 7.0
for a DH.
Yeah.
So that's the record. So Ohtani's going to have the record for most WAR by a DH in a season. So it literally is just record after record after record. Whereas Judge, yes, his season's phenomenal, but he's not going to set a single record. He's going to win another MVP. Going to make them get to the playoffs. It's a phenomenal season. It etches his name amongst the all-time greats, not even just all-time great Yankees, but all-time greats. It kind of solidifies that. But the Ohtani one makes him in the conversation of, and I hate this. We throw around GOAT, greatest of all time, way too often, and I think I heard Mike Greenberg talk about it, and I thought what he said was brilliant because we say it so much because we lack the ability to analyze history properly. He said it in different words, but that's essentially what he said. And I kind of agree with him, right? It's so easy. It's too easy to just throw it out there, right? Without having to take stock into what has happened before,
Right.
right? But Ohtani is now in conversation for the best player ever. Like how we say Bo Jackson might be the best athlete ever, right? Ohtani's in that conversation. He's in that conversation for possibly best athlete ever, like pure athleticism person in the history of the world. He's in the conversation for who is the best baseball player, like the best baseball player you saw. Because I know for us, one of the best, if not the best, that we ever saw was Josh Hamilton.
Oh,
But
yeah.
he would never be mentioned
He would
in
never
a
be
greatest,
correct. Yeah.
right? But in terms of just best baseball player that you saw, Ohtani is now firmly in that conversation, if not the number one, because
Yeah,
of this, regardless of what he does the rest of his career.
Right. I just feel like once you add the pitching aspect to it as well, it just becomes a whole different level that no one can do, and maybe will never be able to do again.
Yeah.
Right?
And then
maybe somebody comes along. I mean, this isn't once in a generation. This is once every 4 generations, right? I mean, to do this at this level too of it's never been more difficult to hit a baseball. I mean, that to me is so remarkable about what he does.
Yeah, and I guess my other question, my last one is this now going to make him the second player to be elected to the Hall of Fame unanimously?
Ooh.
Because the whole thing, right, with all these other players is there was always someone who could justify something, right? And that's why we said Rivera was unanimous, because there is no person worth anything in their life that could possibly justify him not being the greatest closer ever.
Correct.
But for Ohtani, because he's now done stuff where he cannot be compared to people, he's on a different level. And not just like Bonds on a different level. Bonds could be compared to other outfielders, right? You can compare him to Willie Mays, right? You can compare him to all these different Ken Griffey Jr., all these different great Mickey Mantles of the world, right? You can compare him to it, whether right or wrong, fair or unfair. You could. You can't compare Ohtani to anyone. The comparison to Babe Ruth is antiquated at this point, because Ruth didn't pitch this much in his career.
No, I agree with you. I think I never thought about that until you said it, but he should be. He should be the next unanimous. I mean, there's no way, unless he has some catastrophic injury and stops playing right now. There's no way you can't unanimously put him in.
But I guess I'm saying, because you could say that, right? Oh, how could anyone not vote for Derek Jeter? How could anyone not vote for Ken Griffey Jr.? How could anyone not vote for Hank Aaron, right? So you have that, but it's like you have to be on such a different level. And I think it's the comparison thing, right? You can't compare Rivera to anyone because no one's ever gotten close to his level. And that's what I'm saying. Is it possible that right now you can't compare Ohtani to anyone because no one's ever gotten close to the level of production as an all-around baseball player that Ohtani has?
Correct.
Right. It's kind of the amazing thing. Any other Ohtani stuff before we move on? I think I had all of my stats. I was taking as many notes as I could when I was watching it, because I felt like Mac when he's being the Bud Selig of the group. We're witnessing history here, people. Like, it's how it felt. Like, I wanted to yell it in our house, and my wife was like, "I don't care. Turn it down. I'm trying to read."
No, I just texted you guys and was like, please tell me you're watching this and what Ohtani's doing. It's one of those cool moments in baseball that, I mean, the fact that this game has been around for 200 years or whatever, and he's doing
not been 200, son.
whatever, 150 years. 150 years.
Okay.
144 or something like that. But whatever. Hyperbolic.
That's not the correct use of that term. Exaggerating, maybe. But yes, like that does kind of separate, right? It's and then because it's the Dodgers too. The Dodgers have been around for almost as long as any other team, right? It's a very storied franchise. He's doing things that have never been done in that uniform. Like you said, baseball's been around longer professionally, at least organized professionally, much longer than the other sports that we follow, right? And people have never gotten close to what he just did, right? That should speak volumes. to what a historic thing we just witnessed. And we love history. We love education. We love, the amazing, right? And that's kind of what we saw was the unprecedented,
The
the
first
amazing.
baseball game took place in 1846.
The first organized MLB game, jabroni. That's it. Yeah, like I think in the
Abner Doubleday in Cooperstown, New York. First official game of baseball took place in 1846.
Okay, which is disputed. Talk about history. I believe Abner Doubleday was at the Battle of Fort Sumter, which started the American Civil War. believe he was there. So that's going to move us on to our next thing, which is we're going to stay with baseball because believe it or not, there are other teams and other players out there, and a lot of them are vying for playoff berths because we're up to our last week in the regular season for baseball. So we'll turn our attention to some of those teams, kind of highlight some of that stuff. But as always, when we are talking about baseball, we are also talking about Bobo's Fine Chicken in Virginia Beach. Visit them on Shore Drive near Chicks Beach and grab some Bobo's on your way to the beach or a ball game. Bobo's in baseball, there ain't nothing better. Talking about clinching things, the Yankees, they clinched a playoff berth last week in their 2-1 win over the Mariners in 10 innings. I think that was the game that Julio Rodriguez was dodging the flying bat, and instead of keeping his head in the game, was like, hey, look at me, people look at me, and Austin Wells astutely gunned him out in the 10th inning. So that was a nice win for them. The Guardians, they walked off the Twins for the second straight game on Thursday, thanks to an Andres Jimenez RBI single in the 10th. That win clinched a playoff berth for Cleveland. I think they've subsequently wrapped up the division, the Central Division, which has turned into arguably the strongest division in the sport, which is crazy, even with the possibly worst team ever in their division. But maybe that doesn't make them the strongest. Because you could say, okay, all these teams have gotten so many essentially free wins because they had to play this team more than any other team.
You know how many losses the White Sox have?
No, 100. Aren't they 120?
Yes,
they tied the expansion Mets.
I mean that's so bad. That's the most ever, right?
I gotta get one more
to
get
lose
them.
Their next one.
They gotta get one more to break. I think the modern era record. There may be, and again, you'd have to fact check me on this. There may be a team that has lost more, but it was like way, way, way back in the day where they didn't even play 162 games, like some bizarre thing. But I believe they're on pace to set the AL record for worst winning percentage ever. So
the 1899 Cleveland Spiders.
That's I thought it was them.
20 and 134.
Yep. Yeah, I was gonna say I thought it was in the 130s. So yeah, so they won't get to that. That's pretty bad. But again, in terms of modern era, like that's 2 centuries ago, right?
The Mets at 120.
Yeah, in 1962, I think was
Tigers in 2003. Yes, that was 1962. Tigers in 2003 with 119.
I remember that team. Oh boy.
Oh, number 5, 2018 Baltimore Orioles with 115.
I'm sure the Astros are probably on there with some of those teams when they were tanking.
Tigers in 2019 with 114. Oakland A's last year with 112. Let's see. I'm trying to get to Astros.
The Sacramento A's.
2013. 111. There's a lot with 111.
Yep. So
the Orioles again.
Shocker. So yeah, it's kind of become. It's hard, you want to say it's the strongest division because you look at the records, but then you see that outlier, and it's like, man, it kind of it makes you take a step back and try to put that in perspective.
How mad would you be if you're the Mariners or the Red Sox right now, where you're fighting for wild cards?
Imagine if I had 4 more victories. Yeah, right. That's It kind of
Tigers, Royals, Twins sitting right there.
Yep, those are probably 2 of those teams are going to be wild card teams. And one team's going to be out. After the Giants tied the game in the top of the 9th on Thursday against the O's, Anthony Santander, Tony Taters hit a walk-off 2-run homer in the bottom of the 9th for his 42nd bomb of the year in Baltimore's 5-3 win over San Fran. Tony Taters, still pretty good season. Batting average is still hovering around that 230, 240 mark, but to get close to 45...
He's solo 3rd in MLB in home runs.
Really? Goes Judge,
40.
Otani, Santander?
Judge, Otani, Santander with 43.
Which, again, puts what those two guys are doing in perspective. They're so much further ahead than the next closest people because, like, Ozuna is probably up there. I think he's at like 39 or 40.
Yeah, Ozuna's got 38. Soto's got 40.
Yeah.
So there's only two people with 40 right now.
Yeah.
Santander and Soto.
It's
below Otani.
We're witnessing history here, people. I want you to start a Sosa McGuire like rivalry.
He's just jealous because he lost the chugging contest.
Yes. Staying in Baltimore on Saturday, Gunnar, I hardly know her. Henderson delivered the game-tying 2-run double in the bottom of the ninth to force extras against the Tigers, who we'll talk about a little more in a second. But Detroit came around to score 2 in the 10th to beat Baltimore 6-4. That's part of a pretty crazy run that they've been on. And like I said, I got some more stats on them in here in a second. Zach Neto, who's been really good this year for the Angels. He had 2 homers and 6 RBIs as the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, California as well, scored 9 runs all after the 6th inning to beat the Astros 9-8 on Sunday. Couple more comebacks for you. The Brewers, they came back from an 8-0 deficit for you soccer people out there. Scored 4 runs in the bottom of the 8th to stun the Diamondbacks 10-9. 8 runs is a lot to come back from.
Yeah, that's a bad loss for the Diamondbacks.
Yes, especially
they need every win.
Yes. The Rangers, they mounted a 5-run comeback of their own and walked off the Mariners in 9 innings, 6-5 on Marcus Semion's RBI single. And you've got the Phils, the Fightins. On Monday, they beat the Cubs 6-2 to clinch their first NL East title since 2011. That's kind of crazy when you think about that, but that's kind of when that golden era of players left. Ryan Howard, Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley.
Yeah, so what is it? And then the Nats had a run.
Braves.
There, and then the Braves ever since.
I mean, well, the Braves weren't that good at that time, right? So the Nats had
a run,
Nats had a run, and the Braves had the run, and now you're at the Phillies. The Mets, I think, when they went to the World Series, do you remember that in 2015? They probably were up there competing for it. I don't think the Marlins did it. I know the Expos didn't. So, trying to figure out. You're right. It's probably Braves, Nats during that time frame. Again, we're coming up to 1 week left. We're actually in the middle of the last week of the baseball regular season. And here's kind of where your playoff picture stands at this moment. In the AL, the top overall seed is the possibly East champion Yankees, who have already, again, clinched a playoff berth. Number 2 seed would be the Guardians in the Central, who we said wrapped up the division. The number 3 seed will be whoever comes out of the West. It is looking like it's going to be the Astros. The Mariners still 4 games back or something like that. It's going to be pretty hard for them to get to that. So it's Astros match numbers got to be small at this point. Your wild card number 1, your first wild card team is the Orioles, who I think still technically have a chance at that division, but that number's probably dwindling.
So those two Yankees O's play each other, and Astros.
That's right.
Mariners are playing each other right now as well.
Yeah.
So you can do stuff. You can make something happen, or you could, or Yankees and Astros clinch the division very fast.
Yep. The wild card number 2 at this moment is the Detroit Tigers. What? Insane.
8-2 in their last 10.
They entered August 11 games back. I think 11 games back of the wild card.
I mean, I owe them an apology because I was like, why would you not trade Scooble? Why would you not trade Scooble? Why would you not get like a huge haul for these guys? Like, I just feel like it's going to be too difficult to get back in this division. Yeah, they shut me up.
Since August 11th, so 38 games, they're 27-11. And I think a lot of those games wound up being like division games. Like they've been beating AL opponent, like people that they needed to beat, right? So that's, the Detroit Tigers, pretty amazing if they can get in the playoffs. So we get a Mets-Tigers World Series. I think that might be the most unlikely one. I don't know. If you had that on your bingo card to start the year, you should have placed some bets with our DGen gambler, AJ. But not on the dark web, because again, that's what got Kamlo into some trouble with the Chechen investors. Our third wild card team in the East is the Royals, which would be nice to see them get there. I think they're dangerous.
They've lost 7 straight, by the way.
They're dangerous if they can get there. That losing 7 straight is part of learning how to win and dealing with success. They shouldn't be the third wild card team. And you could argue the Minnesota Twins, who are a game back of that third wild card, shouldn't be there.
No, I mean those two teams you said, Royals and Twins, in their last 10 are 2-8 and 3-7.
Yeah,
and the Tigers are 8-2.
That's a big difference, especially at this time of the year. Yes, every game means the same.
Mariners are 7-3 in their last 10. They're right there,
and they're 1.5 back. So they're very much alive, and they looked dead in the water a couple weeks ago too, especially after they fired Scott Service in the middle of the season, which is a very desperate move on their part, especially when they did it right. There's some precedent, right? When the Phillies fired Joe Girardi and hired Rob Thompson. That was fairly early in the. I think it was in like May.
That was really early, yeah.
Right. This isn't. They fired this guy in August, September, whatever it was. That's pretty late in the year to do that. In the NL, the Dodgers would be the 1 seed at this moment out of the West. The Phillies, they'd be the number 2 seed. The Brewers would be the 3 seed. All 3 of those teams have clinched playoff berths. The Brewers have clinched the division. Like we said, the Phillies have clinched the division. The Dodgers still haven't clinched the division, I believe, because the Padres, who would be the first wild card team, have gotten to 90 wins. They've played pretty well this year. And really, if you looked at their stuff from last year, you say they underachieved, but when you looked at their metrics, you're just purely, how many, just if you want run differential, how many runs they put up versus how many runs they allowed, should have been at like 90 wins last year. And they were like 12 games worse than that, something like crazy. So this shouldn't be that surprising to people that the Padres are going to be a 90-plus win team because they have the pieces, they have the talent, and they're kind of showing that right now. The second wildcard team, again, is the Amazons. The Mets are the second wildcard team. If you would have said that a few months ago, people would have thought you were crazy. And the third wildcard team are the Diamondbacks, looking to try to get back to the World Series to avenge their loss to the Rangers last year. The Braves sit at 1.5 games back of the Diamondbacks, but I believe, are the Braves playing the Mets? Is that series?
Yes,
yep.
They are.
So that is arguably the biggest one, to be honest, because, the Yankees, Orioles, both teams are going to get in the playoffs. The Orioles would have to lose all of the rest of their games, and some of these teams would have to win almost the rest of them, right, to kick the Orioles out. But
this is the only matchup that has, like, you could swing a playoff spot in this game, or in these games.
Yes. Yeah. So pretty good stuff there. Anything baseball wise before we move on, boy?
Scooble, as I said before, helping the Tigers get to this position, he definitely locked up the AL Cy Young today.
I think so.
Seven scoreless.
2 hits, I think.
Yeah, something like that. So he's going to be the Cy Young in the American League. And then Paul Skeens should get the Rookie of the Year. I think he better get the Rookie of the Year. I think that's ridiculous if he doesn't. His ERA is under 2.
I mean, I've seen and heard people try to make justifications to not give him the Rookie of the Year, to give it to like Jackson Merrill. And I think that's ridiculous because the only argument you have there is, Jackson Merrill's been on the roster the whole year. It's not like Skeens just showed up in late July and has pitched 2 months. He's May, I think, is when he got called up.
Yeah,
like early May.
Yeah, I mean he's got 22
mid-May.
starts.
Yeah, so it please. He started the All-Star game. Yeah, Jackson Merrill started. I think he was there as like an injury replacement to start the game.
Jackson Merrill's had a great year.
Yes.
But it's been a great rookie year. 292, 24 and 89, 16 stolen bases, OPS at 830. Great year.
It's really good.
Yeah, great year. It's not what Paul Skeens has done.
No.
I'm sorry. It's just not. Paul Skeens you want to talk about witnessing history. Paul Skeens he's must watch every time he takes the bump. Like, I'm not tuning into a Padres game to watch Merrill. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. And I think the other part of it too is Skeens has pretty quickly cemented himself as a top 10 pitcher in the league.
Yeah.
You could argue maybe even higher, right? So the argument against him, I think, is flimsy as all get out.
He has 5 more starts, and we're saying he's the Cy Young.
Yes. Yeah. It's a little crazy there. I think next week we'll do our own awards, like our all MLB team, our Cy Young MVP. We'll do that next week once the season wraps up. and the playoffs begin, because I think they're going to start probably the middle of next week. Playoff wise, I think that last game's on Sunday. Probably give a day or two off and start Tuesday, Wednesday for our playoffs.
I think it's like October 2nd through 4th is the wild card or something, or 3rd through 5th, something like that.
That makes sense. So that's going to do it for our baseball segment. As always, brought to you by Bubba's Fine Chicken in Virginia Beach. Visit them on Shore Drive near Chicks Beach to grab some homemade, down-home, old-style Southern cooking, some chicken, some Southern sides that you may not have seen before, like stewed tomatoes, succotash, great things like that if you've never had them before.
Stewed tomatoes?
Yeah. That's a controversial one for some people. I like them. It's basically tomatoes that you stew, like you kind of boil and mash them. And sometimes you have like some white bread that's dissolved in there, and they're sweet, like there's sugar involved in it. For whatever reason, I think they taste good. Other people, controversial with that.
So what do you do with it?
You eat it. Like you just take a fork and you shovel it in your mouth. Yes. Okay. Succotash, I think, he had okra, I believe he got recently, which sounds really good.
It's very Southern.
I like okra. Succotash might be my favorite. Succotash is lima beans for those of you, and corn. Butter beans is what they would call it, butter beans and corn. But lima beans and corn, that's succotash. That's a good one. Collards, I think he has normally. But yeah, visit them, Shore Drive. They are a can't miss if you're here in the Virginia Beach area. Grab them really on your way to anything, right? Besides to a game or to the beach, but we know a lot of people grab them on their way to work, have them cater for parties.
Sometimes you're hungover and just want one.
Yeah. I mean, yes, truth.
We've done that several times.
Yes, we have. So, Bobos and baseball, there ain't nothing better. We're going to move on to our next part, which is about NCAA football. If we are in the midst of football season, it's the fall, so people stop planning your weddings during this time because...
Do it on a Friday. If you must have a fall wedding, do it on a Friday. It's not that difficult. Fridays are cheaper, and people are going to take off a day anyway to get to your wedding if they really want to come.
Well,
so you end up getting an extra day. Go watch the games at a bar with your buddy on Saturday and your wife. Go to the bar, have some fun. Go watch the games. That's what I did.
Thank you.
I got married the day before college football season started last year. And we had a whole watch party the next day. It was great.
You say not that difficult, though, but as I recall, I could not even attend the watch party because we had to go home with our small child to deal with it. So, yes, the Friday wedding benefit is that, but the negative is there aren't as many people as you think that have the ability to just take off because
you know what?
You're going to have to...
That makes the wedding cheaper.
Or you have people there who aren't able to come, who should be there, who need to be there, right? You're making a hindrance on someone else, right?
Well, I mean,
you could just not get married in the fall. That's a thing.
Just not get married in the fall. That is also a thing.
Right,
it is more expensive in the summer,
or in the winter where you're not going to sweat your ass off. Like there's a lot of alternatives. So people stop planning your weddings in the fall so we can go watch our freaking college football, for God's sakes.
Yeah, because I'm gonna say I've done this at several. I'm sure you've done it at weddings where you're sitting there with your phone.
No, actually, I'm maybe at one of them, one or two. I'm much more concerned though about the past hors d'oeuvres and the cocktails, because if it's an open bar and they're passing out free hors d'oeuvres, I'm gonna get my money's worth. Even though I didn't pay for anything, you be damn sure I will seek out those hors d'oeuvres and I will make great use of that bar. So
can I get a jump? Where are you coming out of? Can I get a jump on the next batch?
Yeah, pretty much Costanza. That's
skipping this section all night.
Yep, that's kind of where we're at here. So yes and no in that regard. But starting with our college football stuff, here's some stuff that was before the weekend. So on our Thursday, Fridays, I think these couple were on Friday night. But Stanford, they won their first Atlantic Coast Conference game on a 39-yard field goal as time expired by Emmett Kenny at Syracuse to beat the Orange. Kenny had 4 field goals that night, including a 51-yarder. So that's a pretty good game for the young man there. But yes,
that's a bad loss for Syracuse to have that game at home. Like if you go on the road and lose that game, it's like, okay, travel. Stanford's better than we think. That you kind of like, tough loss. That one stings a little bit if you're Syracuse. You have them at home. You need to win that game. especially like Kyle McCord, talking all his trash. I mean, they've been singing his praises and everything. You got to win that game.
Yeah. And talking about the Cal, they probably should have beat Florida State in Florida State. They lost 13-9. So you're basically the toast of the ACC was about to be Stanford and Cal, who, believe it or not, watching those two teams play look much more, with it than many of the other ACC teams. Much more legitimate, much more competent is probably the better.
Who's the receiver on Stanford? Eric.
Iomanor, is that it?
I think so. Yeah, number 13.
He's legit.
He's really, really good.
No, I thought Stanford was. I was watching, like, that's a good team. Like, yeah, this isn't a team that you think, they'll vie for a playoff, but that's a team that could definitely be ranked by the end of this year. And same with Cal. I was very impressed at what those coaches have built over there when they were considered the laughing stocks of that conference. So for them to come into a new conference too, we talk about how difficult that is. I mean, we're going to get to Oklahoma here in a second, right? It's difficult to come into a new conference. For them to do it and look at home, maybe that speaks more volumes to the mediocrity of the ACC. I don't know. But they both looked legitimate regular football teams. They didn't look like dumpster fires like you had seen in the past from those schools. Also staying on Friday night, I don't know if you saw this game. This was late, but it was a crazy game. The San Jose State-Washington State game. But
I checked the score
and
I
nuts.
was like, what the hell is happening here? I didn't realize the San Jose State coach is the Old Navy coach.
Yeah, Ken Niumatalolo, Coach Ken.
It doesn't shock me that they're playing well.
No. It's amazing what difference it makes when you have true leaders in charge of people, right? So San Jose State came out, scored 21 unanswered points to start the second half. Then Washington State scored 21 unanswered points of their own just in the fourth quarter to take back the lead. Then SJSU's Trayshawn Hurry was in a hurry to catch a go-ahead touchdown pass with less than 30 seconds left, only to see Wazoo's kicker Dean Janikowski, no relation at all to Sebastian Janikowski, by the way, which is a shame. You wanted that to be Seabass's son. Let's be real. But Dean Janikowski kicked the game-tying field goal as time expired to force overtime. In the second overtime, Washington State stopped San Jose State's 2-point conversion for a 54-52 win Friday night. They almost, are at Ohtani numbers there. So that was a nuts game. I wish that was earlier. I wish it was on this coast because I even had to go to bed.
After dark, man.
No, seriously.
Wazoo's 4-0, by the way.
There are some surprising teams with really good records. I think it's Stanford and Cal. Right?
Stanford, Cal, Pitt, BYU.
Yeah, BYU's 4-0. UNLV, we talked about them last week.
BYU, I'm sure, I don't know if you're going to get to them, but, man, what a ass kicking they delivered the Wildcats of Kansas State.
That's why, an ass kicking is right. But in Provo, at night, that's a real tough place to play. I think K-State got exposed, though, in that game.
Yeah, they did. I think that's one of the most underrated places to play. But, yeah, that was surprising to me that K-State, that they're usually very well coached and very physical and very disciplined and do kind of the little things that keeps you in games. Yeah. And to get punched in the mouth like that.
Yeah.
BYU was not good last year.
No, that game was over before it started.
Yeah.
And speaking of games that were over before it started, JMU pounded UNC 70-50. I think pounded was the best term because that game could have been worse. Really.
Yes, yeah. I was watching that because I think it was like halftime. I think it was halftime with some of the other, like maybe the noon, was it Michigan USC and who was the other big noon game? Clemson, NC State, maybe.
That didn't turn out.
That was a beatdown too. Yep. But I flipped it on and I was like, wait, they're winning. And I was like, oh, they're beating the hell out of them. And then I flipped it on and he throws the pick six, and I was like, they just dropped 53 in the first half.
Yes.
Like, that's embarrassing. Like, that's embarrassing for any school. I don't care if you're playing Georgia.
I agree.
In one half.
I agree. You should never. You're right. Even if Georgia's coming in to UNC, Georgia should not be putting up 53 points against you.
No.
Right. I believe the Duke set a school record for most points scored in a game. It tied a school record for most points allowed in a game in UNC history. I want to say it tied it with an App State game they had a couple years ago that was like 72-70, like that they won. That App State should have won that game. That was a nuts game. Moving on to your West Virginia University by God Mountaineers. Garrett Green threw two late touchdowns, including the game winner with 26 seconds left as West Virginia came from behind to beat Kansas 32-28 in Morgantown.
It was football gods
sparing the state of West Virginia from a full-fledged coal riot.
Yeah.
Like where they would have been throwing coal at people.
Yeah, Neil Brown may not have survived coming out of there. Like his job he may have been canned right there.
Or they would have posted his address online for all Dan Campbell's daughter's friends to go egg his house.
Probably. But I think the football gods got West Virginia that win. Because if you remember the week before against Pitt, it was almost the exact same scenario. West Virginia was up 10 with a little over 3 minutes left in the game, blew it, lost the game. Kansas up 11 with a little over 3 minutes left in the game, blew it, West Virginia wins that game. So it all evens out, right? But huge win to start conference play. It's kind of one of those things like the non-conference really doesn't mean that much if you're a Big 12 and ACC because you're not going to get the at-large bid, right, in the playoff. You have to win your conference. Unless
you're there's only a couple teams because it's
right. Unless you're Clemson or
Miami or Florida State.
Yeah.
Because you have to have the name, and I'd say Tech probably because their name still carries with it some weight for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It matters your name. So you're right. Those non-conference games, whatever. I could go 0-3. I mean, heck, again, Florida State is still alive to get to the playoff.
Yeah, because
they've lost two conference. They're 1-2. They're 1-2 in the ACC, but they run the table. They finish with 2 losses. There's a chance they make the ACC championship game, and all they have to do at that point is win. Now they stink. I mean,
yeah, they do stink.
My God, do they stink? Almost like they've given up. But they shouldn't because.
By the way, there's something about Georgia beating the shit out of you in a bowl game that just destroys your program because it happened to TCU. What the hell has happened at TCU?
Yeah.
TCU went to the national championship 2 years ago, got the crap kicked out of them by Georgia. All of a sudden, they're terrible. They just got smoked by SMU.
Yes, they did.
That should not have happened. That surprised me. And then Florida State, after getting destroyed by Georgia in the bowl game where they decided, like, we're just not going to play anyone, and got beat by 60.
Maybe it's you have so many of these kids who have been told like they're God's gift, right? And that they are, the second coming and have never fully been humbled. And then Kirby in Georgia fully humbled you. And now you can't, it's hard for you to regroup from that because you spent your entire life thinking this mindset. And now you're in a tailspin. You can't recover from it because you're 20 years old and, haven't had enough life, haven't had your ass handed to you enough in life yet. And that's really the first time. Maybe I'm just,
Maybe. I mean, yeah, because if you look at Florida State's roster, I think I saw SMU's coach talk about it because I think SMU plays Florida State this week. And he was like, look at their roster. They've got, 4 NFL guys on the defensive line. So he's like, everyone's preseason picks and expectations for Florida State were correct based on their talent level.
Yeah.
But you got to play the games, and you can have all the talent in the world. I mean, this is Florida State's done this so many times. I really thought they turned the corner last year. But, I remember how many times I remember watching one of the games against UVA a few years ago where it was Florida State doesn't want to win this game. They had so many opportunities. It was like, what the penalties, the undisciplined penalties that were happening and everything. It was like, UVA is the better team. What the hell?
Yeah, well, I wonder if, maybe this was a whole Illuminati plot by the College Football Playoff Committee to take down the ACC, to eliminate them as a threat to the Big Ten and the SEC by forcing them out of the playoff last year, hoping that this would be the effect because they're one of the brands that you could get into the game. Again, just tinfoil hat, ponderings there. Khalil Mullings ran for 2 touchdowns, including the game winner with 37 seconds left as Michigan beat USC 27-24 in the Big House. Welcome to the Big Ten.
That was a great
USC.
game. That was the most Big Ten, like welcome to the Big Ten game too, because I think Michigan had like 60 yards of passing.
Yes, they just ran the ball right there.
I saw people like tweet about like you should never lose a game when the other team's got like this amount of yards passing, like, or maybe running the football and playing defense
makes a difference.
Games.
Yeah, like, you should never lose a game. So what? All those games that Air Force and Navy and Army have won.
Michigan just won a national championship, being very mediocre at passing.
Well, I would say mediocre. They didn't use it as much because they didn't need to. JJ McCarthy was pretty good when he needed it.
Yeah, and he had Roman to be. Wilson.
But there were a couple games last year where they did this, where Michigan did this to people, where they just said, "Nah, well, we're going to impose our will. This is going to be the best way." And I think a couple of those games were games when Sharon Moore was the interim head coach when Harbaugh was suspended.
Yes.
So that should.
I got a question for you. Who's the most Big Ten team? Because there's 3 I can think of right now. It's Michigan, Iowa, and Rutgers.
Speaking of Rutgers kicker Jay Patel, he kicked the game-winning field goal with less than 2 minutes left as the Scarlet Knights beat Virginia Tech 26-23 in Blacksburg. I guess Enter Sandman wasn't playing. That
crowd was out of that game within the first 10 minutes. Rutgers punched them in the mouth, and I was like, there were so many people, like the fan base. Rutgers broke Virginia Tech's fan base too, like how Pitt broke West Virginia's. Rutgers broke Virginia Tech's. They're like calling for Pry's job now. They're like, this is awful. Like the coordinators are terrible. Like kind of like Pry, but the coordinators are terrible. I don't understand what's going on. How can you return all these guys and be this bad? They're doing the exact same thing that West Virginia is doing. They lack an identity, right? They want to prove their quarterback, who's a running quarterback, can throw the football for some reason. That we have to be balanced and we have to do this. Just run the damn ball. I mean, you literally went 7-6. I think they won their last 4 out of 5 or something. And West Virginia did the same thing, going 9-4, winning 4 out of 5.
Running the ball, yeah.
And you return all your offensive line. You return your running backs. You return your running quarterback. Yes, it is important to get some shot plays in, but that's what they were. Like West Virginia was run, shot play. I think they averaged the most yards per catch or something last year. And Virginia Tech was doing the same thing. They just run. And for some reason, they're trying to prove that drones can pass. Which blows my mind. Like these coaches outthink themselves. But you know what Shiano does? My team's going to run the football. I don't care what you guys do. I'm going to run the football. And we're just going to go straight down the field, down your throat, and we're going to run it, and we're going to win. Rutgers is 3-0, 4-0, something like that.
I thought they might have lost the game. But, yeah, I mean, and again, I think it's amazing, like you said, how much of a difference running the ball makes. And also coaching where you don't always have elite talent. That's a thing that a lot of people don't have. So you take these coordinators who are at elite schools. Like I think Pry came, obviously he was a tech guy, but he came from Penn State, right? Where every guy you're getting is so good. And then you go to Tech where they don't have that. Yeah, Tech's got great players and they, have talent, but they don't have Penn State's talent, right? They don't have Alabama's talent. They don't have Michigan's talent or Ohio State, right? So you have to kind of find ways to win where Shiano's always been at Rutgers, right? I think he left, a little bit, I think, with the NFL, had something else, and then came back. But he's been successful there because he knows how to win there with the resources that are available to you and the talent that you're going to get. And, yeah, sometimes you hit it big. You get some guys like their running back. Monungai is awesome.
Monungai's awesome. They also, their backup running back was fantastic in that game as well.
But yeah, I think it's you got to learn how to win in a certain way. Like I said, have an identity.
Look at Monungai's stats in this game. Like Virginia Tech packed the box, right? He had 26 carries for 84 yards.
That wears you down, though.
That wears you down. But guess what? Guess what Rutgers did? They stuck with it, right? They kept running him. I mean, Tootin for Virginia Tech.
Excuse you?
Yeah, he's really good. He had 15 for 122.
Why is
And
he not at 25? Why is he not got 10 more
correct,
touches? Yes.
correct. Drones went 13 of 27
Why is he
throwing
throwing
the
27
football. He
times?
should never throw the ball
Exactly.
over 20,
You're right.
20
I
times a
think
game.
the out thinking comes into play there, and
I mean, I was like, I was looking at West Virginia's because I was thinking, like, I was like, why are they're struggling running the? I mean, not necessarily struggling to run the football, but they kind of abandoned it in the Kansas game. Kansas has a pretty good defensive front, but I'm watching the game, like, it felt like Kansas was dominating that game. If you look at the total yards, it's pretty even. But CJ Donaldson and Jaheim White, who were your two backs that had 800 yards each last year coming back, they had 6 carries each in that game. That's not enough.
no, you're right. I think there's almost like this fear, and I think it comes from a little bit of fan stuff, right? Because the fan who doesn't know better is
They want you to throw the
yelling
football,
about
yeah.
why are you not passing the football, this, and this, because they
Oh
see
God, you
you,
want to talk? I almost got into one at the West Virginia game
oh,
last year because it was playing Texas Tech. So here's the scenario.
is this a Mike Veschi? It's
It
not
was
a
some
not a
it was some
baseball game, buddy.
yeah no some yeah it was some drunk college kid that was sitting behind us, but it
That
was
that's who you want to engage with. Let that be a lesson for us out there. Don't engage with drunk college kids. Don't engage with drunk people in general. Just
well
let them be.
this kid
Let
well
them
he's standing
live.
right behind us, and not a lot of people in the stands at this point because it was a tropical storm that came through the stadium, and it was you know mid September, and the temperature dropped to like 60 degrees, raining sideways. And by the way, Garrett Green's not in the game. It was a redshirt freshman backup quarterback, and it's a defensive struggle. No one can really do anything. West Virginia won that game like I mean I forget what the final score was, like 13-3 or something like that. It was an ugly game, but it was like just run the football, and that's what they did. They ran the football. This guy's behind me just screaming, "You gotta throw the football! What are we doing?" I'm like, dude, are you this stupid?
Yes, because he spent his whole life looking at
Yeah,
freaking TikTok and Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes
watching
highlights
Geno
of those
throw.
guys
Yeah,
chucking the ball around and thinking, "Oh, well, this is easy." He's probably never been on a football field when you've seen that it's not easy to complete a pass. Like those guys are special. It's a lot easier to hand the ball to someone than it is to throw the ball in the air and
I mean
rely on all those
it's raining.
variables to fall into place,
Yeah, it's wet.
like
You
the
have a
weather.
backup freshman
Yeah, it.
quarterback. Like, no, you're handing the ball off and you're getting out of here with a victory, and you're going to the next week.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
Speaking of outlasting opponents, a couple good ones here. Utah, who they just Kyle Whittingham
It's awesome.
is a
He's so
phenomenal
good.
coach. It's so underrated year in and year out, and I'm glad that I think people are starting to realize it. It's amazing it took him 15 years
Yeah,
for people to realize it, but
I will say about Utah, I owe Utah and Doug Howard an apology because Doug was on when I was doing my Big 12 preview, and we were talking about how like there's always teams in the top 25 that are ranked way higher than they should. And I'm looking at Utah. I'm like, I don't understand Utah. They went 8-5 last year. They like Cam Rising's injury prone. He's coming back, but they lost a lot of guys on the back end of that defense.
I don't know.
Like including Vaki.
I thought your ranking should have had them higher. Like I'm with Doug. Actually,
Yeah, and
I would have.
he was like Whittingham, and I was like, yeah, I get it, but you're in a new conference too. And like,
Coaching means a lot.
I didn't like who, yeah.
And I think they lost. You said they went 8-5. I gotta think like 4 of those losses were like tight. Maybe even all 5 of them were tight.
Yeah,
So
they didn't have,
no,
and they did a great job of getting. They have Zach Wilson's brother as the quarterback. So when Rising's out, I mean, he looked great against Oklahoma. I mean, not great, but like good enough.
Yeah, so they beat Oklahoma State in Stillwater 22-19. They had 182 rushing yards by Micah Bernard. Speaking of rushing,
that was awesome.
Mizzou, they survived Vandy 30-27 in overtime only after Vanderbilt missed the game-tying field goal. So either Vanderbilt's a little better than we thought, or Mizzou's not as good, or maybe a combination of both.
I think it's a combination.
Tennessee, they took care of business in Norman as they took out the Sooners 25-15 in Oklahoma's first game as an SEC opponent, and the SEC opener for both schools this year. Boston College, they scored a late 42-yard touchdown pass from Thomas Castellanos to beat Michigan State 23-19. BC's pretty good. Again, talk about coaching. Bill O'Brien's their coach. First year there, so yes, first year is always hard, but when you have someone in charge who's so experienced in leading men, it makes a difference. Iowa, they beat one of their rivals, Minnesota, 31-14. Do you know what trophy they just won? The name of the trophy?
Is it the? It's not the Heartland, is it?
No.
No, because that's Wisconsin, Iowa. What trophy do they win?
It is the Floyd of Rosedale trophy that is in the shape of a pig, a 100-pound bronze pig. Do you know the story behind Floyd of Rosedale?
No.
So I looked this up. This is a crazy story. So I believe the year was 1934. And in 1934, Iowa's star running back was Ozzie Simmons, and he was one of the few black football players in the country at that time. And they go to visit Minnesota, and Minnesota's taking a bunch of cheap shots at him, like after the whistle, piling on all this crap, right? And that not only pissed off the players at Iowa, but drew the ire of the governor of Iowa. And so ahead of their game the next year, which was going to be in Iowa City, the governor said some comment about, like, you know, if the officials are going to stand for what happened to Ozzie this year, our fans surely won't. And so Minnesota lost their mind. Their lieutenant governor is accusing him of inciting riots and saying you're unfit for office and all this crap. And, you know, eventually cooler heads prevailed. The governor of Minnesota reached out to the governor of Iowa and said, I will wager you a prized pig from each state's fair on who will win this game. So both teams, I think, were top 5 teams at the time, by the way. So this is 1935, the next year. Minnesota beats Iowa in Iowa City to win the matchup. So the Iowa governor goes and gifts this pig to the Minnesota governor. The pig's name was Floyd because they named him after the governor of Minnesota, whose last name was Floyd. And he came from the Rosedale farm in Iowa. Well, poor Floyd, he died 8 months later because he wasn't properly vaccinated for the right diseases. I guess the Minnesota people who got him when he got to the farm in Minnesota, they assumed that because he came from the University of Iowa that they had kept up on his vaccines. I guess they didn't, and the poor guy died of cholera 8 months later. But in Floyd's honor, they commissioned a sculptor to sculpt a 100-pound pig statue as their trophy. So you get the Floyd of Rosedale trophy. So Iowa has claimed Floyd back.
That is the most Big Ten
Yes.
story I think I've heard.
Yes.
My God, they have every game seemingly has a trophy in the Big Ten.
Correct.
Right, how many trophies outside of the Big Ten are there?
I mean, they're they have trophies, but they're not iconic like the Big Ten trophies. Like the old Oaken bucket, like there's some sweet stuff.
Skyhawk, right? The heart.
I mean, Paul Bunyan's axe is the best one.
Hell, they
obviously
even created one when Nebraska came in. For some, it is a sweet trophy, the Freedom Trophy. I think
Nebraska and Iowa.
Nebraska, Wisconsin.
Oh, Nebraska, Wisconsin. Oh, you're right. That is such a Big Ten thing. But the trophies are sweet. The axe is the best one. Lifting up 100-pound pig is kind of sweet. The last college football thing here, though, may have been the coolest one. This is the Colorado Baylor game. I don't know if you saw this. It was nuts. Shedeur Sanders was phenomenal in that game. He led the comeback in the second half. He completed a just crazy 43-yard touchdown pass to LeJontay Wester to force OT as time expired. Great throw rolling to his left, flipping it up there. Was amazing too when you watch the replay. He's throwing to a spot. You can see it. He sees this little opening and he dumps the ball right in the opening. And Wester slides right in. Like he knew that I gotta get the ball off one because their line is freaking horrendous. Like just
awful.
I mean, It might as well be us out there. Truly. And he knows I gotta get it off. And how do I give someone a shot? Well, he saw like this perfect little triangle right there and just said, all right, dumped it right in. And Wester caught it, forced OT. After the Buffs scored, the Bears came down and Colorado forced a fumble out of the end zone as the guy's diving in to get the tying score. It was awesome. I wanted to rip my shirt off. I don't know if it's because all the kids on Colorado started ripping their shirts off, but I almost stood up and ripped my shirt off. It was sweet. That was a great game. That was such a college game. No NFL game is going to... No.
That was the definition. That felt like the old Big 12. right? That felt like the Big 12 of like 2012 to 2018, right?
Yeah.
Of just like ridiculous crap happening, and no team does ridiculous shit better than Colorado.
Agreed.
Probably because their skill positions are so damn good,
Yes.
and their line is so damn
So
bad.
So bad. My goodness. Shador is awesome.
Shador and Travis Hunter are really, really, and the other receivers they
Jimmy
have are
Horn
really good.
and Wester, they're all really good. But man, is Shador doing some stuff where it's what the best part is the fact of what we just said. Yes, he's got some great skill guys, but the rest of the team sucks. They stink, right? They need to get their act together, but that almost makes it better what he's doing because that sets you up for success at the next level. Because you don't always walk into the perfect situation, especially if you might be a high draft pick like Shador might be, like a very high draft pick. You're not walking into, Belichick's great 3-time defending champion type crap, right? 8 Super Bowl ring stuff, right? You're walking into sometimes a dumpster fire that you need to resurrect. And if you are used to playing that way, where you're not having the help, got to get the ball out quick, can't hold on to it,
Yeah, he
be
does
tough, make the right reads, get out of bounds when you need to. When you're used to doing those things that other guys who come from like Alabama aren't used to because they've never had to, that makes a difference.
He does a great job of like not just scrambling around. Like how many guys have we seen like Manziel, Caleb Williams, guys that are just kind of running around back there, and that shit doesn't work in the next level.
No,
Shador does a great job.
Only if you're Mahomes.
Of buying time and making reads and making plays and like making throws down the field. Like he's not just running around for his life; he's moving in the pocket.
Well, he is running around for his life, but he's running around intelligently and purposefully.
Correct.
Right, and that he's the real deal. Real deal. I wish that game was pretty late, which I'm okay with, but maybe we get some earlier games.
So I've seen a lot of the Travis Hunter Heisman talks. He's the September Heisman because the meat of your Big 12 schedule, and people are like, I don't care what their record is. He's going to be the Heisman. He's so good.
Yeah,
let's just calm down. Let's calm down. He is that good. He's amazing, and he will be a star in the NFL. But let's calm down with the Heisman.
Well, the issue is because
they're gonna win 5 games.
Well, that's
6.
That's the thing is the Heisman is determined by like hype train. When you build your hype train, so he's got that.
In November,
but what your team's record is
making winning plays when Jackson Dart is playing Georgia and has throws for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns, he's gonna win the Heisman.
Well, I mean, it is also tied into team success. It's tied in position, right? You got to be a quarterback essentially. Yeah, your Mark Ingrams, Devontae Smiths of the world, but they're anomalies. You got to be a quarterback. It's really hard. It does, and it's not. It's not necessarily the best player.
If their team was good enough to win 10 games, hell, with him being this good at being 2-way player, they might only need to win 8 games.
Well, that's the thing is that that Heisman Trophy is not. It's not the best player in the country. It's supposed to be, right, but it's not. It's the best offensive player on the best team.
Correct.
For the most part, right? And so that's where a guy like Hunter, who you could make a very good case, he's the best player in the country. You can make that case, a pretty solid case. But that doesn't mean you're going to win, right? I mean, Orlando Pace might have been the best player in the country that year, and he's a lineman, so there's no chance he's going to win, right?
Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah, and Ndamukong Suh I thought was the best player in the country that year, and he had no chance, right? So it is different. They're worth a watch because of the skill guys, but man, can someone just – you got any guys in high school that come up and play? Like, can we call some guys up from the JV to play line? Like, it's a mess there on the offensive line front.
Somebody was talking, they were like, we need to get – like Colorado's doing a bad job recruiting on their offensive line because they may be getting I think they have like a 5-star freshman that's starting, but he's still a freshman. But they're like, you gotta get some guys that are, John Deere, Toby Keith dudes that are, big hog mollies, baling hay. That's what you need on the offensive line.
Hog mollies, yeah. Yeah, moving on to NFL, we had week 3 in the NFL. this week. Saquon Barkley of the Eagles now. He scored the winning touchdown with a minute left as the Eagles defeated the Saints 15-12 in New Orleans. I hope you had the under and the total points for that game because they didn't even crack 30. Malik Neighbors, he became the youngest receiver to catch 2 touchdowns in a game as the Giants beat the Browns 21-15.
Really he's going to make Daniel Jones look like an average quarterback. That's how good he is.
As opposed to looking like the dumpster fire that has been out there.
Threw a couple balls to him, and I'm like, oh my God, he's so open. Just give it to him. And it's like the circus catches Neighbors has to make to score a wide open touchdown.
Yeah, he's pretty good. And I do like, I was listening to him talk after the game, and they're trying to get him to talk about his performance, and he gave the most Bull Durham answers. I loved it. No, basically like, yeah, it was a great performance by our team. This is what we're looking for. Like literally the question was like, you're the youngest to score these 2 touchdowns in the game. Talk about your performance and what are you doing out there that's making you successful? And he just goes, yeah, it's a great performance by our team. DJ is throwing the ball around really well, and we're trying to, get these things done. And I thought we played really well today, and it was good for us to get a win. And, now we're moving on to our next game. It was like, yes, thank you. Like, that's what's going to give you success, especially like what you said. You're not going to have every ball thrown perfect to you. You're going to have some passes that you technically drop because they touch your hands because they're not thrown where they should be type of thing. So you can't have a giant head and be a cocky SOB because it's not going to serve you successfully on a team like that. It's just not. So that was refreshing to see him be that humble about how well he performed and basically willing them to victory. To be honest, talking about willing a team to victory, Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle Rocket out there, threw for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns as the Panthers beat the Raiders in Vegas 36-22. Threw the game winner to Adam Thielen, just dropped it in a bucket as Thielen, who has some of the best hands in the league, dove for it. Pretty remarkable. Andy Dalton's still out there as much maligned as he was for whatever reason.
He's been a solid quarterback.
He's been a solid quarterback in the NFL.
Career.
Yeah,
he's got a Rose Bowl victory too.
That's true. The Ravens, they avoided a late game, potentially super embarrassing collapse to the Cowboys in Jerry World as they beat them 28-25. They're up 28-6 late too. Like it wasn't like 28-6 in the second quarter. It was late, pretty late. They're up that. They were able to hang on. Derrick Henry, who is really good. He has not really lost a step. He had 151 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. The Ravens needed that game desperately. The Cowboys desperately need to win their next game, I think, or they're going to be in some hot water. They don't look too good. I guess this is what happens when you don't retool your line and you spend all your money on your receivers. Right, Jerry. Josh Allen of the Bills, not the Jaguars. Because, Josh Allen on the Jaguars is a defensive end.
I know who he is.
Yes. Josh, who's very good, too. But Josh Allen of the Bills threw 4 first-half touchdowns as the Bills demolished Jacksonville 47-10 on Monday night.
He looks fantastic to start the year. He's free. It's almost like when Baker lost OBJ in Cleveland. And it was like, oh, he's free to play the quarterback position. No more Stephon Diggs in your ear telling you he's open every goddamn time down the field.
Yes.
Josh Allen's free to play quarterback, and he's really good at it. And he's free to be himself and to make plays for other people. And look what they're doing to start the year. I mean, maybe they have like a hiccup in the middle or whatever, but they look so good right now to start the year. And you're like, well, what weapons does he have? He's
Doesn't
Josh
matter.
Allen. He's a quarterback now.
Right, it's amazing how the criticism for him about that, but you would never criticize Mahomes, who normally doesn't have any weapons, and he just has Travis Kelce, who is his main target, but has been pretty quiet. But no one would ever criticize Mahomes about not getting Kelce the ball. No one ever, right? But Mahomes is out there and is never thinking for a second, I have to get Kelce the ball. He doesn't care. He's making the right play. That's why they've had revolving doors of receivers over and over again for like his entire career. So, yeah, kind of interesting that Allen gets, oh, well, how can you not do this and all this stuff? But when you look at, the way he's performed, in a lot of ways, he plays a similar way to Mahomes because it's kind of off-script stuff. It's like you said, it's making plays. It's almost basketball-like out there for the two of them. So yeah, pretty amazing there. Talk about amazing. Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders, the second overall pick this year. He went 21 to 23 for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns as Washington beat Cincinnati in Cincinnati 38 to 33. Also on Monday, as there was a Monday night doubleheader. Jaden Daniels, he has a really low number of incompletions this year. I want to say it's like he doesn't even have over 20 incompletions through 3 games.
He completed 91% of his passes yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of the highest in NFL history. Like it's like top 20, top 30, I think, in terms of a single game in NFL history. Pretty remarkable. He's been good. He's been.
I like him.
Yeah, I liked him at LSU. My qualm was: is he going to rely too much on his legs? Is he going to go one read and take off, or is he going to actually play quarterback? And he looks like he's playing quarterback.
Yep.
And he made a couple throws downfield that were holy crap.
Yeah. He feels like he's been smart with his legs too.
Yes, getting down, getting out of bounds, which he's going to need to. Like you can't take the hits. No, yeah, he's not a big dude. Not like Josh Allen or Roethlisberger, who are just tree trunks. He can't afford to take lick after lick. Right. So yeah, I hope he does well. He's looked the part so far. Anything else NFL wise before we move on?
How about the Steelers?
Yin's up there in Pittsburgh by the Crick are doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, you were able to talk about their draft. I was out on vacation at that point, but God, I love what they did in their draft, and you're literally watching it. And it's what bothers me. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but if I'm a Bears fan, it bothers me. But because I kept sitting there with the Bears, I'm thinking like everyone's like, you gotta take Caleb Williams, you gotta start over, whatever. I'm like, why not just keep Justin Fields and draft linemen and get some protection for him, and then maybe get a weapon later in the draft, or maybe trade for one, or do whatever. They decide to go Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, and
which I still don't think that's the wrong picks.
I don't think it's the wrong thing. I don't think it's the wrong picks, but I would have rather kept Fields and gone lineman. But the Steelers go, okay, we'll take Fields, and then we'll draft Fontenot, who I thought was the best lineman in the draft, and then we'll take Zach Frazier, who I thought was the best center in the draft.
Yeah,
and the measurables or whatever for Frazier weren't there, but if you just watch the film, it's insane. So I've just been like, there's this guy, Baldy, Brian Baldinger, who I think played in the NFL as a lineman. He has great lineman like film, and he every single week, the second after the Steelers play, is like, I just love watching Zach Frazier play. He's like, just watch it. He's like, how many? Just count the pancakes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a rookie center. He's like, oh, that guy's on the ground. This guy's on the ground. Like, Frazier's been unbelievable.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. There's no substitute to productivity. And I think that's like we talked about with Jared Allen. That's kind of what productivity. Like the measurables weren't there. Like, yeah, big enough and strong enough, but not, jump off the page big and strong, right? You may not walk past this dude down the street and say this guy's in the NFL.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
I was listening to Romo talk about Zach Frazier, and he's like, oh, he's calling like he called like a protection, like he heard like flipper. He's like, oh, flipper. He's like, oh, that's Frazier changing the protection.
Yep.
Like that's really good for a rookie center in his third game or whatever to do.
Yeah.
And he's like, this guy's gonna be a Pro Bowler. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's
this year. Then
that's another thing with center is they think of it as just another lineman position of we can just put anyone there, right? We'll draft this guy, and so we'll have these 5 guys here, and one of them can play center. And that's not how it works. It's a very nuanced position. There's so much to it, especially on the mental part, that people don't realize or understand because they just see the person as a lineman. And they go, oh, lineman, yeah, whatever, just big guy push someone, right? And they don't understand all that goes into it, especially when as the person has to snap the ball, you're having to do an extra thing that none of the other linemen are having to do. And so oftentimes you're getting hit before you get to hit the defensive lineman because you have that extra split second that you have to snap the ball. And that's hard to teach people. It's hard to get someone who's used to their whole life getting on their front hand, firing off, delivering the blow. It's hard to teach them that, hey, you're probably going to get hit and you're going to have to like regather yourself almost like a wrestler. Like that's really difficult.
Frazier was a 4-time state champion wrestler in West Virginia.
Yeah, I mean that translates so much to that position because you're gonna have to.
His, like if you get a chance to watch his tape, and like go to like Baldy's. It's Baldy at Baldy NFL. That's his Twitter account. And just like he's got the tape of Frazier, and it's incredible. He literally says like, "I'm going to start calling him Matt Frazier," of like putting a wrestler on the mat like that. Like every time you watch him, he uses his hips so well and his legs so well, and just his like grip strength and just ripping through and just taking people down legally.
Yeah,
and finishing blocks, and it's, to me, it's not a coincidence that the Steelers are having success on the offensive end. I mean, they're not.
Success is relative.
They're doing what they need to do and what they're supposed to do on the offensive end.
Yeah,
and to have the linemen that they've drafted 3 linemen in the last 2 drafts and their top 3 picks, I think Broderick Jones at right tackle, Fontenot, and Frazier, I believe, were their like last year's first round pick and then this year's first and second round pick.
Yeah,
they've built a line and they're going to play defense.
It's amazing that the Steelers, the Ravens, the Patriots of old, the Chiefs. You look at the way they've built teams, and they don't pick the flashy guy, right? Yeah, every so often they'll take, someone like Xavier Worthy that you kind of felt like, oh, you need to. But if you look at the people who are on their team, you got a lot of guys like a Nick Bolton, who's like a late round pick, right? Who's making all these tackles for KC. You have that, and it just kind of, one, it speaks to their player development, but 2, it's like, why are not more teams thinking this way? Because they're thinking more of the business end of selling the tickets and this and that, and they're not thinking, like, the Steelers don't give a crap. Like, they're going to sell their tickets. They're looking for another, they have, 5 championships they want to get. On the other hand, they want 6. Right? I think they have 5. Maybe they've gotten to whatever. Right? They're just looking at championships. So Ravens, championships. Patriots, championships. The Chiefs now are looking at how can we get to a whole hand's worth of championships, right? They're looking at those things that other franchises aren't for whatever reason, maybe mismanagement, maybe hubris, whatever it is. It is amazing to see those teams succeed time and time. So that's going to wrap up our NFL stuff this week. That's going to move us on to our Mimosa Minute, which is brought to you, as always, by Maine & Co., the creators of the modern mimosa. Visit them at mainsip.com and follow them on Instagram at Maine_Co to get your modern mimosas today. Look for them at Indiana Fever home games. Maine & Co., championing women's athletics since 2020. And speaking of the Fever, we have the WNBA playoffs that kicked off late, like basically this past weekend. And the Fever, they started out, I think, like 0-8, and they've made the playoffs pretty amazingly. But your matchups, what you have is the top 8 teams in the whole league, regardless of division. There's no East-West in the WNBA. It's top 8 in the whole league playoff. Like quarters, semis, finals, right? And so the quarters are best of 3, so it means these games are pretty important. Number 1 is New York Liberty. They're the odds on favorite to hoist the trophy. At the end, Sabrina Ionescu, phenomenal. Brianna Stewart, I believe, is on the Liberty as well. They've been a pretty good force this year. They're playing the Atlanta Dream, who are the 8th seed. New York already leads their series 1-0. Number 4, the Las Vegas Aces, who are looking for a three-peat, by the way. They're defending champs.
Aces, okay.
They are, again, they're the 4 seed. They take on the number 5 seed Seattle Storm. Vegas leads 1-0 in that series. Asia Wilson of Vegas, she was the unanimous MVP this year. She averaged 27 a game, 12 rebounds a game, over 2 assists a game, and almost 2 steals per game. So she's the best player in the world right now. She's phenomenal. Number 2 is the Minnesota Lynx. They are taking on the number 7 Phoenix Mercury. Phoenix, Diane Taurasi is potentially her last year. I know it's kind of been some up in the air, but it's kind of feeling like this is her swan song. I think 20 years in the league, I believe, which is amazing. But Minnesota leads that series 1-0. And the number 3 Connecticut Sun, they taking on the number 6 Indiana Fever. Isn't it amazing that the Fever started 0-8 and they became the 6th seed?
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. And it didn't feel like they snuck in the playoffs, but Connecticut took that first game 1-0. So like I said, the first round is best of 3. So, potentially seeing some of these teams advance soon. Once you get to the semis and the finals, those are best of 5, which will be interesting. I kind of like that. Like, I know it's like, oh, why can't we do best of 7s and all this stuff because all the other sports do it? But sometimes best of 7 drags.
It does.
And yeah, game 7's awesome.
Game
but
sevens are great, but man, you get games like 3, 4, 5 in there.
it still matters as much.
I know it still matters as much, but you're talking about dragging on. It does drag on
In the best of 7 series.
And
yeah.
it does make for less upsets.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
best
that's
of 7 makes for less upsets. Best of 3 get hot for a couple games, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the reason. I don't know if you know this, but way back in the day, like 1900s baseball, they did best of 9 for the World Series. Best of 9. Could you imagine that? Oh, holy crap.
People
that's a month-long series. You know? Best of 9.
I've already been told baseball, like, by my wife, the baseball season is just too long. Like, yeah, I get it. Yeah. I love baseball, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Anything else mimosa-wise before we move on?
No. I figured the WNBA would be Mimosa Minute.
Yep, that's good to look for. So that's good to do it for our Mimosa Minute. As always, brought to you by Maine & Co., the creators of the modern mimosa. Visit them at mainsip.com to order yours today. Look for new releases like a mezcal margarita, French 75. I believe they got there an Irish coffee possibly coming soon. But order your stuff online through them. Maine & Co., championing women's athletics since 2020. And that's going to take us to our final segment, which is our favorite segment that we do each week. Our favorites is always brought to you by One Legacy Title and Escrow in Jacksonville, Florida. Visit them at onelegacyflorida.com and follow them on Instagram at onelegacyflorida to see how they can help you with your next house closing. One Legacy Title and Escrow, because your legacy matters. And this week we went with our favorite hitting pitchers, or our favorite pitchers who rake. Kind of in honor and tribute of Shohei Otani, who is a pitcher who hits. He hasn't pitched this year, like we said before, but in honor of him, we wanted to go back and revisit some of our favorite pitchers because, as some of you may know, there's no more hitting pitchers unless you are Otani and you choose to use that pitcher as your DH, universal DH throughout the league, right? So you're not going to have your classic Bartolo Colon taking James Shields deep in San Diego and Cohen losing his mind in the booth, which is like one of the great, he said it, one of the great moments in the history of baseball. Yes, I don't think that's that exaggerating a bit, but we went with our favorite pitchers who hit. So, Boy, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm going to start with the OG, the original Superman, Babe Ruth. He's just a fat old man with skinny little legs, but he can throw for a couple years. So we'll go with that one just because every time Shohei does something, Babe Ruth's name is mentioned.
Not anymore because Shohei's
not anymore. Yeah, but
whoop that fat old man.
Yeah. So
God,
you gotta tear down the past to move forward.
I read a story about Babe Ruth. He showed up like an hour before a game was about to start. He had been like out all night. He was at a Negro League game. He was at a Negro League game, and he was out all night and showed up an hour before the game started. And they were like, "What the hell are you doing, man?" And he goes, "They're playing the St. Louis Browns." He said, "I don't need to take batting practice to beat a bunch of bums like the Browns." And they suspended him for like a week and a half. And he was like, "No, I don't care."
What a guy.
Oh, there's so many Babe Ruth stories that are so absurd.
I love it.
Absurd.
It's hilarious. Moving on. Number 4, Carlos Zambrano of the Chicago Cubs. I remember him just being, he was always he was a switch hitter as well.
Yes, he was.
I believe. Just a mean son of a bitch.
That's all that Malort he was ripping in the dugout.
That'll do it. That'll do it. I feel like he was just always into something. Like throwing hard, just taking people deep from both sides of the plate. Carlos Zambrano. Number 3, Shohei. I mean, one of the best players we'll ever see of our lifetime, if not the best. We talked about him at length earlier. Just remarkable what he's doing. Number 2 might be one of my favorite. I think he would be any starting pitcher list that you have, like regardless of what it is. I think I would put this guy on there. Madison Bumgarner. One of my favorites to ever do it. Also a mean dude. And just coming up clutch all the time for the Giants. He was a great hitting pitcher. Lefty thrower, righty hitter.
Very rare.
Yes.
Ricky Henderson.
I did not know that.
Yep.
Yeah, but Mad Bum, love Mad Bum.
And Ryan Ludwig. I don't know. I remember that, but Ryan Ludwig threw lefty and hit righty.
Number one, you mentioned him earlier, Bartolo Colon.
Yes.
I just think it's just one of the funniest things that he was like 42.
Yes, he was.
Just taking a deep, like his first career home run. Just this fat dude,
just flip the
going out there throwing like topping out at 85 miles an hour. I love Bartolo Colon, and dude just keeps playing baseball. I think he's like, what is he out there in like Dominican Republic or something? Just like throwing.
He's got his own academy. They went to his academy on The Amazing Race. I was watching the episode with Jordan, my wife, and I was like, is that a statue of Bartolo Colon out front? I was like, this is so cool. And then they had to do a challenge. At the end, he was there. It was his academy. He handed them the ticket to go to the next thing. I was like, oh my God, Jordan, that's the coolest thing ever. That would get me on the show. Like, that is the thrill of a lifetime. That is the best thing these people are going to do. And she's like, who is this fat old guy? That's Bartolo Colon. Like, that's the coolest thing.
On that dude's name.
Yes. So my list, I didn't include Babe Ruth or Shohei just because they're kind of on a different plane. Babe Ruth, mostly because when he was doing his hitting, his damage hitting, he wasn't pitching anymore, right? And Shohei it's different just because not because he's so good, but because it's like he's DHing so often, so he's a DH and a pitcher, right? This kind of separate there, but obviously he should be on any list of, like, if you said the best hitting pitchers ever, technically he counts as that, right? Honorable mention, I had Wes Ferrell, not Will Ferrell, but Wes Ferrell. He had a 280 career batting average, 38 home runs, which is the most for a player that's as a pitcher who's not Ruth or Otani. He's listed, if you go to his baseball reference page, he's listed as pitcher and pinch hitter. He was used as a pinch hitter so often because he was that good of a hitter. And he played like 15 years in the league. I think he finished with like a 4 ERA, won over 100 games, I believe. He was a pretty good player.
He almost won 200 games,
193. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, back in the 20s, 30s, early 40s, Wes Ferrell, that's pretty. When I was doing research, I was like, that's nuts. That's amazing for this dude. Number 5, Dontrelle Willis, the D Train.
Oh,
He's so quirky and unconventional, but man, just taking a mighty hack up there. He actually made good contact. He was a good hitter throughout his career. As brief as it was, I wish that career was a little longer. Michael Lorenzen, number 4. If you see this dude,
he did a couple years of playing outfield, coming into relief pitch. It felt almost like Little League, right?
Yeah.
Like high school where they're like, oh, got to go to you're not going to the bullpen, you're going to your right fielder.
Yeah, no, but because, he wasn't playing, like, it's not like he started the game in right field, but it was like one of those back in the day when you didn't have a DH in the NL and you ran out of, spots, and you have the pitcher spot, you got to fill it. Well, he's in a pitcher, and we need to bring in some like position player or something, or do some double switch, and he's going to take the spot of, like I said, the right fielder, and those ones going to come in and pitch, right? But he's yoked. If you saw this guy, you might think he plays a different position or a different sport. Didn't he throw a no-hitter last year for the Phillies? I think he did after he got traded. But he's always been a good hitter, and I think he's been used a couple times as a pinch hitter back in the day. But Michael Lorenzen can mash.
He throw a no-hitter for the Phillies.
That's what I said. Yep. Number 3 is CC Sabathia. And while his hitting was short-lived because it was only for that spot of time when he was on the Brewers, when he got traded at that deadline, he single-handedly took that Brewers team to the playoffs. His pitching was phenomenal. It was sub-2 ERA. But then he'd get up and he'd like mash a homer. He was winning games, like you said, in Little League, where the pitcher, gives up no runs and then he gets up and hits like 2 homers. It was like what Sabathia was doing during that stretch. So love CC. If he could have hit for his whole career, his numbers would be phenomenal. Number 2 is Madison Bumgarner. Like you said, a great hitter. I think a couple games Bochy DH'd him. Like when they were playing crappy Oakland teams, like he DH'd him. He legitimately could have been a 25 to 35 homer guy every year if he wanted to. It was pitchers took notice, and he was taking like good pitchers deep, like Kershaw. taking dudes like who are dudes deep. So he was a really good hitter, even though swing looked very Hunter Pence unconventional like at times. Just country boy going up there and hitting is what Bumgarner is. And number one, I gifted you a signed picture of this guy, but it's Mike Hampton. Mike Hampton of the Rockies.
That's right.
I mean, he was awesome. He had, I want to say it was 3 or 4 years, he legitimately batted over 300 as a pitcher. Like, he could hit, man. That dude could hit. And it didn't matter that it was in Colorado. I don't care. When your full-time job is to not hit but to pitch, and you can still go out there and hit as consistently as Mike Hampton did, that's pretty amazing, pretty incredible. Because he wasn't even that big of a guy either. And I also love that he was
stout.
Yeah, he was able to succeed in Coors Field to some extent, which very few people can as a pitcher.
291 in 2001.
That was his highest. He had it over 300.
That was just one of them where he hit 7 home runs in that year.
It's ridiculous. That's a career for a lot of guys.
He hit 300 or better in 4 separate seasons. Those some were small sample size.
Doesn't matter.
But yeah, that's
no.
pretty amazing.
Mike Hampton was a great hitter, right? Especially at an era where there's certain guys throwing some stuff. He was awesome. I hope that picture is safe somewhere and hung up in your house.
It is not hung up yet because the man cave has just storage. It's there. It's over there.
Okay.
I had it hung up in the apartment.
You know where I think it'd be good? Right behind you, right there, where that stupid
art.
Yeah.
Shit, this is art. Get it?
Yeah, that would be a good place for Mike Hampton to go, right above the fireplace. I think that'll really complete the room, bring it all in together.
It's like old school when he's hanging the painting. It's like a little to the right,
Yep.
Yeah, that works. That's what I picture. I picture that being crooked as hell, like Mike Hampton.
Yes, that'd be perfect. Like I said, bring the room together. So that's going to do it for our favorites this week. As always, brought to you by One Legacy Title and Escrow in Jacksonville, Florida. Visit them at onelegacyflorida.com to see how they can help you with your next house closing. One Legacy Title and Escrow, because your legacy matters. That's going to go ahead and do it for us as well for our edition of What Caught My Eye. As always, I am your host, the coach, Nick Veschi. He's the boy, Stephen Veschi, not pictured because he's dealing with, maybe Nigerian investors or whatever, Chechen mobsters or, whatever type of crazy people you think of. Hungarians, maybe they might throw their hat in the ring. Stephen Comlo, he's not here tonight. Hopefully he'll be back next week. Before we wrap it up, as always, follow us on our socials at WCME_sports. That's on Instagram, on Facebook, on X. Visit our website, WCMEsports.com. Our episodes drop every Wednesday at noon. As always, be decent to each other. Have a good one. We'll see you next time. Take care, Guatemala.